So that's sort of an overlay, I think, that I find in net neutrality regulation. And many people think, yeah, as you say, this is about protecting traffic in data packages, and this is, you might say this is an economic or a business issue more so than a human rights issue or freedom of speech issue. And I think that is the way, certainly a substantial portion of the affected people look at it. However, I do note this. I do think that it's important, the comparisons to the common carriage doctrine in our earlier communications modes, that this is a very important means and a very important right for us to be able to communicate free of discrimination through these conduits. So. Let's see. I think that I'm unclear about your question, sir, about the difference between the public and private entities. So if you could say a little bit more about that.
Well, we understand the difference between private and public entities, and the differences are clearly broad. I'm talking about a private entity. That's what I mean. When I'm letting you know about this project, which is a web trust, it's illegal in the exercise of a professional exercise. I mean, which inconveniences they might have. The question with respect to the balance between what you mentioned, actually, between private entities.
Okay. Well, one response I guess I would have is that, in the United States at least, the difference between the public entities and the private entities is of great importance for purposes of constitutional law, right? Because if a private entity discriminates against your speech, nobody can criticize the government at my house, in my dining room, because I like Obama. That I can discriminate against your speech all I want because I'm a private individual and it's my home, right? However, if the government were to do that, right, the state, the city, a public or state entity engaging in restrictions on speech like that, that distinction is of great importance for First Amendment and for other constitutional purposes in the United States. Now, I talk about the state action doctrine in my presentation and about the difference between private ISPs censoring and ISPs censoring at the command of the government, and I say that if they're doing so at the command of the government, that's equivalent to the government itself doing the censoring under our state action doctrine in the United States. But unfortunately, I'm not familiar with the analog to the state action doctrine in these countries, in Latin American countries. Can I say something about the deep packet inspection question, which I didn't actually address deep packet inspection, but I think that there are very important privacy implications to this sort of deep packet inspection, looking into, right, the ISPs or the government looking into the contents of web traffic and finding out information that they need in order to conduct their censorship. So I think there are not only free speech implications clearly, but also data privacy implications, which we seem to care an awful lot less about in the United States. We focus more on free speech protections than data privacy protections, I think, unfortunately.
Last round of questions. Adnan, please introduce yourselves. and the deal will close. Etico Lanza from Uruguay, from Access of Information Center. I will go back to filtering equal to censorship. And according to the Article 13 and according to the
Nos acaba de dejar, el Estado no podría filtrar, salvo, de acuerdo al 13.3, cuando se trate de 13.4, pornografía infantil, si lo asimilamos a espectáculos y la posibilidad de censura de espectáculos en el caso de la infancia, y el 13.5 si interpretamos el tema del discurso de odio como posible, pasible de censura previa bajo el triple T, ¿no? Ley, etcétera, etcétera. Esa es una parte de la pregunta, si es correcto la interpretación de acuerdo al artículo 13. Y la otra es, tú decís, bueno, no se podría de algún modo evitar el filtrado de privados, y la pregunta es qué pasa cuando el proveedor es una empresa monopólica, ya sea pública o estatal.
Eleonora, ¿querías hacer así? Ya está el micrófono allí. Después.
Quería preguntarte cuál era tu opinión en relación...
Preséntense, por favor.
Eleonora Rabinovich, de la Asociación por los Derechos Civiles de Argentina. Mi pregunta iba en relación al régimen de Estados Unidos, la DMCA. Algo escuchamos durante el día, pero me gustaría preguntarte cuál es tu opinión sobre el régimen, qué régimen debería existir en relación a la protección de la propiedad intelectual y si debería ser más parecido a la CDA o no, o qué tipo de condiciones deberían existir.
Alberto Cerda, Universidad de Chile. Tengo una consulta, pero más que nada es cuál es la reacción que le provoca una cierta paradoja o dilema que se presenta en la regulación americana. Por un lado, tenemos que los instrumentos internacionales admiten ciertas excepciones a la libertad de expresión basadas en orden público. Uno podría suponer que China censura basada en orden público, basado en la preservación de la moral pública. Uno podría suponer que la restricción a los contenidos xenófobos en Francia y en Alemania se fundamenta en dicha excepción. Y uno, en cambio, ve que en Estados Unidos tenemos una ley de decencia de las comunicaciones que prácticamente provee una amplitud de margen de maniobra para los prestadores de servicios de Internet. Y sin embargo tenemos una DMCA, una ley de copyright que obliga a bajar los contenidos cuando infringen los derechos de autor. Mi pregunta es, ¿cómo entiende la doctrina americana la excepción fundada en infracción a los derechos de autor en el contexto de los tratados internacionales que limitan las excepciones respecto a la libertad de expresión? Porque sinceramente no veo el nivel de analogía con orden público o atentado a la moral. ¿Me explico?